sale of live, locally raised poultry resumes. The Journalists Association to hold a protest march over the freedom of speech. And at least 26 killed in renewed street violence in Ukraine.
Good evening. The sale of live poultry in Hong Kong resumed this morning after a 21-day bird flu ban. Over 20,000 locally raised chickens hit the market. A ban on mainland live poultry imports will continue for 4 months. Chicken prices today were more expensive than before, but as Vicky Kung reports, there were also vendors who offered a buy one, get one free scheme to attract customers.
Back to business. The sale of locally raised live poultry resumed at the Changsha Wan Wholesale Market this morning after a 21-day ban. Some 25,000 chickens were on offer today, but about 1/3 of the birds were older and bigger than the usual ones because they had to be kept at the farms over the past 3 weeks. They were sold at a wholesale price of $15 to $16 a catty, and the younger birds at $23 a catty. But it didn't matter to some buyers at the Kowloon City Wet Market.
How many chickens are you buying today? How many old and young?
2 old and 1 young.
So how much are you spending today?
Around 600.
Standard-sized chickens were sold at about $48 a bird this morning. That's $3 more than usual. But demand for live chickens is still high. This vendor has doubled her supply. She says she's selling 160 birds today, with about 30 of them being older chickens. Another vendor even tripled her stock to 300 chickens. She says she has set aside 200 birds to be sold under a buy one, get one free promotion offered by chicken contractors. She said the scheme is aimed at clearing the large number of chickens being kept at local farms because of the ban on sales. Overweight chickens weigh about 5 catties each and are twice the size of those usually put up for sale at the market. Vendors here said an older chicken can serve about 8 people at one meal. A ban on mainland live poultry imports remain in force for 4 more months. The government is still looking for a site for temporary storage in order to separate mainland and local chickens before bird flu test results are known. This will help prevent cross-contamination when imports from the mainland resume. Fute Ao in Shengshui is one of the potential sites. Vicky Kong, TVB News.
The Hong Kong Journalists Association will take to the streets on Sunday to demand that Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying take action to maintain freedom of expression in the territory. The group plans to hold a rally outside the CE's office following a protest march, but it still has to get the final approval from police. Ronnie Samtani reports.
The Hong Kong Journalists Association says it's holding the protest march to resist attempts to silence the media. Recent incidents, including the firing of commercial radio talk show host Li Wai-ling, the replacement of Ming Pao Daily's chief editor Kevin Lau, and the contents of newspaper columns being censored or changed, have raised concerns about Hong Kong's press freedom and freedom of speech.
Journalists never want to be the focus of the news. We are there to report. The sole purpose and the key purpose is to increase public awareness of the tightening of media control in Hong Kong. We want to tell the public that we are now in great danger. It's not about the work of journalists, but it's about the freedom of Hong Kong. When media freedom goes down, the next will be speech freedom and many of our human rights here.
The Journalists Association plans to hold a protest march on Sunday afternoon from Chater Garden to the Chief Executive's office at Tamar. It said the police had earlier agreed to the group's plan to hold a rally outside the CE's office, but this morning, a police community relations officer informed the group that a top-ranking police official is having second thoughts. The Hong Kong Journalists Association urged the chief executive to keep his promise to uphold press freedom and freedom of speech in Hong Kong. The Journalists Association said Leung Chun-ying, as a CE candidate in 2012, had signed the group's press freedom charter, so he has an obligation to tell the public how he will live up to his words. Ronnie Santani, TVB News.
Anti-government protesters in Thailand massed outside caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawat's temporary office today, where they demanded her resignation. After yesterday's clashes between police and protesters in Bangkok left 5 people dead, authorities are scrambling to protect Yingluck, whose problems are mounting in the face of charges of corruption.
If we can prevent Yingluck from doing her job in Bangkok, we can do the same wherever she tries to hold office. That's the mindset of anti-government protesters who traveled to the outskirts of Bangkok to continue their efforts to oust the caretaker prime minister. They took to shouting in front of soldiers standing guard outside the Defense Ministry building where Yingluck is temporarily working from. Organized by their leader, Suthep Thaugsuban, they aim to squeeze her out of office to suspend what they say is a fragile democracy under her administration. In the face of yesterday's deadly gun battles that left 5 people dead and more than 60 others injured in Bangkok, authorities are focusing on safeguarding Yingluck. She'll need the extra protection now that charges have been filed against her over a failed rice subsidy scheme. The troubled rice program Yingluck supported was set up to pay farmers way above market rates. But once it proved too expensive, her government lacked the power to keep it funded. So come February 27th, the National Anti-Corruption Commission will summon Yingluck to answer to charges. Investigators suspect the scheme was riddled with corruption and a waste of taxpayers' money. In a televised address, Yingluck insists the charges against her are politically motivated. Meantime, a spokesman for the military said it will only intervene if police fail to maintain security in the capital. So far, the military has kept its distance from the crisis, even though it has a long history of intervening in politics.
Ukraine has seen its bloodiest day since the former Soviet republic won its independence. Officials say 26 people have died, including 10 police officers, in an explosion of violence between police and anti-government protesters. James Aiken reports.
Overnight, Kiev's Independence Square has become a war zone. Ukraine has seen periodic political turmoil in 22 years of independence, but it has never experienced violence on this scale. The unrest has spread to Ukraine's western cities, where opposition to President Viktor Yanukovych is strong. Shouting "Down with the gang," protesters stormed an Interior Ministry building in Lviv last night. In the capital, as heavily armed police destroyed protest strongholds in central Kiev, opposition leaders urged the thousands of demonstrators to hold their ground. We have nothing to lose now and nowhere to go, says this demonstrator. After hours of clashes, police gained ground, but at a heavy cost. Many victims died from gunfire. Hundreds more were injured. A late-night meeting between opposition leaders and Yanukovych ended with no agreement on how to end the violence.
I'm very unhappy because it was no discussion and President don't want to listen opposition.
Meanwhile, alarmed Western governments are demanding restraint and dialogue.
I'm deeply worried by the escalation of violence in Kiev and the numbers of reported casualties. This violence and bloodshed must stop immediately.
To hear the views of dead bodies, hundreds of wounded, is making me to stand in front of you and shaking.
Yanukovych says he's tried to compromise, but opposition leaders crossed the line when they called people to arms. He said opposition leaders must separate themselves from radical forces. Nationwide demonstrations erupted in November after Yanukovych pulled out of a planned trade pact with the EU, deciding instead to accept a multi-billion-dollar aid package from Russia. James Aiken, TVB News.
High drama on the streets of Caracas as Venezuelan opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez turned himself in. A defiant Lopez told supporters he was handing himself over to an unfair justice system. A security vehicle holding the 42-year-old Harvard-educated economist crawled at a snail's pace as anti-government demonstrators blocked traffic. After he was transferred to a van, Lopez still managed to address his supporters via a megaphone before he was taken to a military base. And in a pre-recorded video, he urged the opposition to continue its campaign against President Nicolas Maduro. Lopez is facing murder and terrorism charges in connection with anti-government protests over the past week that left at least 4 people dead. He's due to appear in court later today.
Next, a tense political standoff in Libya. 2 militia groups have demanded Parliament hand over power. Officials have called that an attempted coup. Libyan Prime Minister Ali Zadan, for his part, played down the dispute. He said everyone has reached an understanding and wisdom has taken over. The crisis is seen as a power struggle between the Prime Minister and Islamist factions in Parliament trying to remove him. Legislators were given a deadline of 9 p.m. last night to step down or be detained. But the situation appears to be calm after the deadline that is expired. The head of the Libyan General National Congress, the body that oversees the country's parliament, condemned the ultimatum set by the militias. He called it an attempted coup that goes against the wishes of the people. 2 members of the Russian protest band Pussy Riot have been released from police custody after being held in connection with the theft in the Winter Olympics host city of Sochi. Maria Alyokina and Nadezhda Tolonikova were held for about 3 hours at a police station before appearing with other women on the steps wearing their trademark balaclava masks. They told reporters they were questioned without lawyers present and that police used violence during questioning. They say they were in Sochi to record a music video about Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Sochi police say they questioned the women about a theft at the hotel they were staying at. The 2 band members were released from prison in December after serving time for hooliganism.
6 world powers and Iran opened their latest round of talks in Vienna yesterday on Tehran's disputed nuclear program. Under an interim deal last November, Iran has curbed some nuclear activities for 6 months in return for limited relief from sanctions by the West. Diplomats are now keeping their fingers crossed on whether they could come up with a long-term agreement.
It was a very good beginning.
And the atmosphere?
The atmosphere was good.
This is a negotiating process, so what emerges at the end of it will depend upon the progress that's made. The aim is, first and foremost, to create a workable framework to make the talks run as smoothly as possible, but it's impossible for me to say now, at this point, what the result will be at the end of this particular round, I'm afraid.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said economic sanctions over his country's nuclear program damaged the West and its people as much as it affected Iran. He said those sanctions fueled conflict and harmed ordinary civilians. And still ahead in our newscast, government demands a thorough probe into MTR maintenance. Government may further tighten the use of mobile phones by drivers. And Carrie Lam says the Timothy Tong controversy